Good afternoon and welcome to IBA News this Monday, the 22nd of August. I'm Elon Aslan-Levy, joining you live from Jerusalem. The Israeli Air Force pounded a reported 50 suspected Hamas targets in northern Gaza overnight in retaliation for yesterday's rocket attack on Sderot. 5 Palestinians were said to have been injured in the airstrikes. Palestinian media reports out of Gaza said Air Force planes struck numerous suspected Hamas positions in the Beit Hanun area in northern Gaza throughout the night, and IDF tanks also shelled a number of sites. The report said a water tower was damaged as well as a military training ground near the Erez border crossing. While the Abu Ali Mustafa brigades of the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine claimed responsibility for yesterday's rocket attack, the army says it holds Hamas responsible for maintaining the calm and has no interest in an escalation. In Sderot yesterday afternoon, residents were sent scurrying after the red colour alert was sounded throughout the town. A rocket exploded between 2 houses in a residential area, causing damage but thankfully no casualties. Just hours after that rocket was fired at Sderot, the Hamas military wing staged a parade in Rafah, southern Gaza, exhibiting rockets and weaponry during the march. Also on display were mock prison cells bearing the words written in Hebrew, "Prison for the enemy," in an unsubtle hint to the terrorist organization's plans to launch kidnapping attempts in future. Hamas spokesman Abu Obaida boasted that the organization continues to develop its weapons capability ahead of the next round of fighting with Israel. A new poll of Israelis and Palestinians has found that a small majority on both sides still favor a peace settlement establishing a Palestinian state alongside Israel, despite years of conflict and deadlocked negotiations. Aryeh O'Sullivan has more.
As polls go, there was nothing surprising here. Both the Palestinians and the Israeli public don't see a peace agreement breaking out anytime soon, and there was a low chance of any independent Palestinian state in the next 5 years. Tamar Herman, an Israeli political scientist with the Israel Democracy Institute, who conducted the survey with the Palestinian pollster Khalil Shikaki, said that under the current circumstances, the results were not amazingly encouraging, but also not discouraging.
I would say that the situation is so-so. It is less depressing than it is normally being portrayed in the media. It is certainly less depressing than if you take what the leaders are saying. But we have not crossed the point of no return, but it takes much leadership in order to pull the public into active supporting of another round of talks. Certainly public opinion is not the main obstacle right now because there is a potential for the resumption of peace talks.
Is public opinion now, in this moment, not pushing the peace process forward?
It is not pushing for a peace process, but it does not push against the peace process. It is actually quite, I would say, indifferent in a way. And this is why I'm a bit more optimistic than before we did that, because I thought that the opposition would be much more firm than it actually is.
The poll found that 51% of Palestinians and 59% of Israelis still support a two-state solution. On the Israeli side, 53% of Jews support the establishment of an independent Palestinian state. Among Israel's Arab minority, the number is much higher at 87%. Conversely, just 34% of Palestinians and 20% of Israelis support the idea of a single binational state where they are both citizens with equal rights. One key discovery in the poll was the introduction of incentives such as linking Palestinian-Israeli peace with a wider Arab foreman, which dramatically changed the outcome.
There is only one very important element that we have not seen in previous years, and that is the interest among the Israeli public in peace in the region, Arab-Israeli peace. Peace with the major Arab countries, the Saudis, the Gulf countries, Egypt, Jordan, and beyond, seems to be a very important driver in Israeli attitudes. There is more willingness to compromise on the Israeli side if Palestinian-Israeli peace is essentially framed within a context of an Arab-Israeli peace.
Now, you mentioned a few incentives that were changing the graphs on the Israeli side. What were the incentives you found on the Palestinian side that would change it?
We have found that there's one incentive that works for both Israelis and Palestinians equally. changing the attitude of 1/4 of the Palestinians and the Israelis, and that is the peace with the Arabs, that the Palestinian-Israeli peace is not restricted to Palestinians and Israelis, but that it also includes Arabs and Israelis. This seems to be a very strong theme for both Israelis and Palestinians.
The poll was backed by the European Union, which ironically discovered that Israelis by far prefer they stay out of any peace brokerage. Ari O'Sullivan for IBA News.
The US State Department has accused the Palestinian Authority of promoting anti-Semitism. It is the first time the Obama administration has accused the PA as well as Palestinian terror groups explicitly of anti-Semitic attacks on Israel. The annual report recently released by the department, called 2015 Report on International Religious Freedom, accuses the official PA media of carrying religiously intolerant material, referring to Jews as evil, and denying a historical Jewish presence in Jerusalem. The section on Israel refers to attacks on Israeli Jews, citing increasing tension and violence on the Temple Mount and the Israeli casualties in attacks by Hamas and other terror groups. The report also refers to the rocket attacks on Israel launched from the Gaza Strip, as well as an anti-tank missile fired by Hezbollah, which killed 2 soldiers in January in the Mount Dov area. It also details the increasing anti-Semitic material broadcast by PA media in the West Bank and Gaza, noting the de facto control of Gaza by Hamas prevents the PA from investigating and prosecuting Gaza-based cases of religious discrimination, including anti-Christian bias and harassment. The report says the Hamas-run media continues to encourage violence against Jews. The Palestinian Authority continues to enable jihadists as they terrorize Israel and Christians in the region. That is why the United States must stand with our greatest ally in the region, the report states. An Israeli delegation has met with senior Egyptian officials in Cairo, according to a report by the London-based Al-Quds Al-Arabi, which said the delegation yesterday stayed in the Egyptian capital for several hours. No details were released concerning the meeting. In June, Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi called on Israel and the Palestinians to return to the negotiating table, offering to host talks himself. In an interview with reporters yesterday, the Egyptian president said Russian President Vladimir Putin had informed him of his willingness to host direct talks between Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas. In an interview on Egyptian television, Assisi spoke of international efforts, including the French initiative, being invested to encourage the renewal of peace talks between Israel and the Palestinians. If the issue is resolved, he said, it will have a positive effect on the region. During a visit by Egyptian Foreign Minister Sameh Shoukry to Israel in July, Netanyahu reportedly told him he would be willing to meet Abbas in Cairo for peace talks sponsored by al-Sisi. The Air Force plans to shut down one of its older F-16 fighter jet squadrons as part of efficiency cuts. According to military sources, the squadron is to be phased out from March 2017, leaving dozens of permanent servicemen and women concerned for their future. The squadron is located on an airbase in the periphery, which cannot be identified due to security restrictions, and layoffs are likely to have ripple effects on the economy of this undisclosed area. The professional crews have been told by senior commanders that efforts will be made to keep the layoffs to a minimum. The IDF spokesman's office said that the scale of the downsizing was not yet clear, but in any case, forces would be given support services by the defense establishment. When Prime Minister Netanyahu travels to New York next month for the United Nations General Assembly, he will be joined by the family of the late Lieutenant Hadar Goldin, killed in action in 2014's Operation Protective Edge, and his remains are still being held by Hamas in Gaza. UN Ambassador Danny Danon said he is working to arrange diplomatic meetings for Leah, Simcha and Tzur Goldin to push the issue of Israel's MIAs back on the world agenda. Simcha Goldin told press that UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon should take responsibility in light of the fact that Lieutenant Goldin was killed during a UN and US mediated ceasefire. The family will inaugurate a temporary exhibit at the UN headquarters of drawings by the late Goldin titled The Final Peace, with a ceremony to be attended by the Prime Minister in a bid to bring their son and other MIA Oron Shaul home. Over 100 ultra-Orthodox men demonstrated outside the IDF's Jerusalem Enlistment Bureau last night following the arrest of a yeshiva student for refusing to sign up for military duty. Most of the protesters are believed to be from the radical anti-Zionist Neturei Karta sect. Police were pelted with stones and demonstrators tried to block the road. 2 protesters were arrested for attacking police and a minor was arrested for damaging a police vehicle. The draft dodger in question is reportedly a yeshiva student who was denied an exemption from service he sought on the grounds of mental unfitness. He claims the order never showed up in the post. This follows riots on Friday over the arrest of another yeshiva student from the Belts community who failed to report for military service. Israel's Supreme Court ruled this month that valuable personal papers of the great Czech Jewish writer Franz Kafka, brought to this country by his friend Max Brod and held by the heirs of Brod's secretary, must now be handed over to the National Library in Jerusalem. IBA's Kalev Ben-David looks at the Kafkaesque story behind this tangled literary affair.
Kafka. Is that your real name?
Yes. Why shouldn't it be?
The great Czech Jewish writer Franz Kafka created a world that so vividly described the feelings of alienation, despair, and absurdity which characterize our modern lives that a new word was coined to describe them: Kafkaesque. But even Kafka couldn't imagine that nearly a century after his death, a Kafkaesque legal struggle would erupt here in Israel over part of his literary legacy. And the truth behind this story can be found here at the National Library of Israel in Jerusalem. Dr. Aviat Stolman, you're chief curator here at the National Library. How did some of Franz Kafka's papers end up here in Israel?
Well, some of them have been in the National Library for many years. Kafka was corresponding with Martin Buber, and since Martin Buber's personal archive has been here since 1965, we have that correspondence. We also have a Hebrew-German notebook that was written by Kafka in one of his attempts to study Hebrew. Kafka's Hebrew must have been very good. We know that because of the type of words that we see in that notebook, and that has been donated to the library about 20 years ago by somebody who wishes to stay anonymous.
Isn't it true that Kafka, toward the latter years of his life, even thought of making Aliyah to Israel?
Yes, I mean, this has been documented that he thought of making. Of course, he died very, very young and also sick, and so that wasn't a possibility. But and in addition, of course, when Max Brod left Prague, he took with him a suitcase which was full of papers from that belonged to Kafka. Some of them were given to him by Kafka during his lifetime, and some he actually took from his desk after Kafka died, and he brought them all to Tel Aviv.
When did the National Library first become aware that there were other papers of Kafka's here in Israel?
When Max Brod died, of course, the library was in touch with his secretary, Mrs. Hoffe, in order to receive the material. And that has been something that was not very successful. And during the early 70s and even in the 80s, there were ongoing discussions with Mrs. Hoffe and unsuccessfully bringing the documents to the library. Only when she died at the advanced age of 101, I believe that was in 2007 or 8, and her will was opened up and being authorized by the court. The National Library again approached the court.
The state of Israel sued the daughter of Eva Hoffe in order to recover the material left by Max Brod, including the Kafka papers. And after nearly a decade of litigation, Israel's Supreme Court ruled that the material must go to the National Library, as they believe Max Brod had intended. Dr. Stolman, what other Kafka material is there in the Max Brod estate?
As far as we know, there are, I believe, 7 vaults in Israel and in Switzerland containing material from the Brod estate, and those vaults also contain some of Kafka's writing. In addition, there might be some papers in the possession of Hoffe's family, and there are also more material that has been sold during the years since both died, have been sold to other parties in Germany and other places around the world.
What is the financial value of some of these papers left by Franz Kafka?
I believe 1 or 2 years ago, I saw in a German auction house a letter written by Kafka to Bode that contained 2 sheets of paper, and they were sold for about 100,000 euros.
When will the public get the chance to see some of this Kafka material?
We will be receiving some of the material within 2 or 3 months. The material will be processed, digitized, cataloged, published, and part of the publication will also be actually having here an exhibit with Broad's material, with Kafka's material, available to the public.
Franz Kafka died at age 40 of tuberculosis, never fulfilling his dream of making Aliyah to the Jewish state. But at least part of his literary legacy will at last finally find a home here at the new National Library complex being built in Jerusalem opposite the Knesset. This is Kalev Ben David for IBA News.
Intriguing. Meanwhile, at the Computer Science Olympiad in Kazan, Russia, the Israeli delegation has brought home 2 medals, silver and bronze. The high schoolers competed against teams from 81 other nations. In the 2-day Olympiad, students had 5 hours to solve 3 sophisticated computer algorithms. The Computer Science Olympiad was the last in a series of international science Olympiads this year, in which the Israeli medal count stands at 14, with 6 in maths from Hong Kong, 4 in physics in Zurich, and 2 in chemistry in Tbilisi, beyond the 2 now in computer science. Education Minister Naftali Bennett praised the Israeli delegation, adding that Israel will continue to strengthen instruction in mathematics so that more Israeli school children will be exposed to the wonders of science. Good news for lovers of classical music. The International Chamber Music Festival begins on the 1st of September at the YMCA here in Jerusalem. The 10-day festival offers works by such maestros as Haydn, Mozart, Brahms and Beethoven, as well as compositions by Stravinsky and Shostakovich, to name but a few. Performing for the first time at this year's festival are Chen Halevi, Alexander Sitkovetsky and Elena Bashkirova, playing Ustvolsteraya's trio for clarinet, violin and piano. In finance, both the Tel Aviv Stock Exchange and the shekel are mixed in today's trading. In weather, temperatures dropped today and are expected to remain stable throughout the week. And that's all for today. Aria O'Sullivan will be back tomorrow. I'm Elon Aslan Levy, wishing you a good evening, live from Jerusalem.